With a country that is known for developing a form of boxing that includes throwing kicks, knees, and elbow strikes in addition to punches and is known as Muay Thai, it shouldn't be too surprising to know that they have their own version of chess as well. We just have to see if their version of chess is just as interesting as their version of boxing. Greetings and welcome back to Checkpoint Gaming, Chess. With this episode, we will be going over Makruk. With Makruk, it is a form of chess that is played within the country of Thailand and is also known as Thai chess, Cambodian chess, and formally Siamese chess. Although little is known about the history of this version of the game, it is closely related to that of Chaturanga, although it has been sped up a bit. And when it comes to the player who moves first, it is the player who controls the white pieces. The game is played between two players upon an 8x8 board where each player has a set of 16 pieces. These pieces consist of a king, a queen, 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, and 8 pawns. With the initial positioning of each piece upon the board, it consists of the following. On the near row of each player, each rook is found upon the far square, the knights are on the adjacent squares, the bishops are on the squares next to them, and the king and queen upon the center 2 squares with the queen, which is the smaller of the 2 pieces, always found to the right of the king during setup. With the pawns, they're found upon the 3rd nearest row to the player with 1 pawn found within each square, thus creating an empty row between the pawns and the other pieces. It is worth noting that with the king, queen, and the bishops, they essentially possess the same shape but are different sizes. And with the rook, it too is similar in shape, but it is much more squat in nature. This can be confusing for novice players, but once a player begins to gain experience and level up within the game, they'll be able to remember the difference between them. With the game's pieces and their given movement, they consist of the following. With the king, which is also known as lord, it can only move 1 square in any direction along the file, rank, or diagonal, although it doesn't have the capability to engage in castling. On its first move of the game, it has the capability of moving like that of a horse. With the queen, which is also known as seed, it can only move 1 square diagonally. On its first move of the game, it can move 2 squares directly forward. With the bishop, which is also known as nobleman, it can only move 1 square diagonally or 1 square forward. With the knight, which is also known as horse, it can move 2 squares along the file or rank followed by moving 1 square over, thus creating a right angle and an L-shaped pattern. It is also the only piece that is able to jump over any intervening pieces. With the rook, which is also known as boat, it can move any number of squares the player desires along the file or rank, and it cannot jump over any intervening pieces. With the pawn, which is also known as the cowrie shell, it can move 1 square forward into an unoccupied square, but when it comes to that of capturing, it moves 1 square diagonally. With that said, it can never capture when moving straight forward, but it is unable to move 2 squares forward as part of its initial movement, like its Western cousin is able to do in chess. When a player's pawn reaches the 6th row from the player, which is equal to that of the 3rd row of the opposing player, it gets flipped over, indicating that it got promoted, which is also known as the promoted cowrie, and moves just like that of a queen. And the only limitation that a player can have when it comes to that of the promoted pawn is equal to that of their initial pawn count. When it comes to that of capturing the opposing player's pieces, it occurs when any piece moves into a square that is occupied by an opposing player's piece, causing it to be removed from the board. It is worth noting that with the pawn, it is the only piece that captures opposing pieces diagonally. So when it comes to that of all other pieces, they capture as part of their normal movement. With the king, it isn't allowed to be captured during the game. If a king ever finds itself being threatened with being captured, which is known as check, its controlling player will have to immediately protect it by either moving the king out of danger, capturing the piece that is threatening the king, or to otherwise interpose a piece in order to protect the king. However, if the king is unable to be removed from being checked, then it's in checkmate and they will lose the game. And if a player finds themselves in a situation where any move they make will put their king into check, but their king isn't found in check at the moment, then the game will end in a draw. When a player finds themselves in a situation where they have a group of less powerful pieces when compared to their opponent, then 2 special rules are present that can cause the game to be declared a draw. These rules consist of the board's honor rule and the piece's honor rule. With the board's honor rule, it occurs when there are no unpromoted pawns found upon the board and a player finds themselves at a distinct disadvantage. When this occurs, said player can begin counting their moves aloud up to 64. If said player reaches that of 65 in regards to their move and they haven't been checkmated, then the game is deemed a draw. With the piece's honor rule, it occurs when a player finds themselves in the situation where 1. They only have their king found left upon the board, and 2. There are no unpromoted pawns found upon the board. At this point, the player found in this position will have to stop and figure some things out. The first thing the player will have to do is to find the move count number, which is performed in the following fashion. It is also done through that of asking, and if the answer is ever no, then they'll move on to the next question until they reach question number 6. First, does the opponent possess 2 rooks? If they do, then the number is 8. Second, does the opponent possess 1 rook? If they do, then the number is 16. Third, does the opponent possess 2 bishops? If they do, then the number is 22. Fourth, does the opponent possess 2 knights? If they do, then the number is 32. Fifth, does the opponent possess 1 bishop? If they do, then the number is 44. And sixth, does the opponent possess any pieces at all? If they do, then the number is 64. A variant to this move count is as follows. First, if the opponent has 2 rooks, this number is 4. Second, if the opponent has 1 rook, this number is 13. Third, if the opponent has 2 bishops, this number is 18. Fourth, if the opponent has 1 bishop, this number is 41. Fifth, if the opponent has 2 knights, this number is 29. Sixth, if the opponent has 1 knight, this number is 63. Seventh, if the opponent has 1 queen, then the game is a draw. Eighth, if the opponent has a queen and 2 pawns, this number is 83. And ninth, if the opponent has a minister, a bishop, a knight, and a rook, this number is 10. The second thing is, after finding the count number, all of the pieces that are found upon the board are to be counted. This consists of the pieces that belong to both players, including their kings. And the third thing the player is to do is to finally make their move, which is to be done by beginning to count from where said player has left off. This is to continue until the player had made all of their moves as determined by the move count. If the player reaches the move count number without having their king be placed into checkmate, then their opponent will have a final chance to deliver checkmate. But if the player is unable to do so, then the game ends in a draw. In order for a game to come to an end, one of 2 conditions will have to be met. First is when a king has been placed into checkmate, the game comes to an end with the controller of the checkmated king losing the game. Second is when a player is unable to move any of their pieces without exposing their king to that of check. This will result in a draw, and if a player is reduced to just their king, their opponent will have to win the game in a prescribed number of moves which was addressed earlier. But if the stronger player possesses a composition of pieces that aren't listed, then there is no limit to the number of moves that is to be applied to the game. So with that said, that is what you need to know about Makruk. With that taken care of, we can start talking about Kotu Len. If you liked this episode, feel free to give it a like, and if you want to stay up to date on any future episodes we upload, go ahead and subscribe. You can also support us on Patreon for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/checkpointgaming. See you in the next episode, and happy gaming.